Your soul is so pure, it said, I'm going to go into this place. And in order to go into this place, I can't remain in heaven and say, hey, sparks, come out. I have to go down. But it's not only I have to go down, I have to become entangled. I have to become enmeshed. I have to allow myself to become, so to speak, a victim in order to be able to be inside that space. And at that moment, you have to know that the soul itself was never contaminated. Never. It can't be. But there's souls that sign up for this journey. And it seems like an incredibly, incredibly painful journey, because it is. But really what's happening here is, these are the souls that destroy the impurity in the world, and impurity in the community, and impurity on the planet. These are the souls. It's a lot of courage.
TheYeshiva.net.
Okay, today's class is dedicated by our very own Shali and Fegi Gans, with great appreciation for all of the life-changing chassidus that we learn. Thank you, thank you. I got a text that this is the announcement today. Thank you so much. Bracha v'atzlacha and everything. Ad bli dai. Mitoich menuchas hanefesh or menuchas haguf. So last year, on Tuesday morning, it was the third class in the Maimer and Derech Mitzvosecha of the Tzemach Tzedek about the Kohen serving or not serving in the Beis HaMikdash when he's a Balmum, when he has certain physical disabilities or blemishes. And last year was extremely very, very powerful and potent and very relevant idea. So if you didn't have a chance to listen to it, it's kedai to listen to it. That's Tuesday morning. You can hear it or watch it on the yeshiva.net or on the podcasts with the source sheets. And we are now up to Lamed Bais Amud Aleph, or in the English it would be, what is it? 63. Lamed Bais Amud Aleph, in the middle of the page. The line starts Chayil, mamash in the middle of the page. Lamed Bais Amud Aleph, the line starts Chayil, Lilchem, Elchemes Hashem, you see, Lo'itzim Bilo Mepiv, V'cholzine Krava Afkid Biyada. What was the main point? Mamash, to summarize, the main point of the last class was that in the attempt of what we call Malchus, which is the divine energy that goes in and gives life to all of the worlds, that's the energy that really needs to go sometimes into very difficult and challenging places to extract all the goodness that is entangled and enmeshed and tethered with so much more. In the process of which he spoke about the first birur, there's the second birur of Chachma, but there's the first birur of Malchus. And you cannot elevate something in a genuine way if you're not ready to go into it, to get down. Because, as he puts it, the mevarer needs to be mislabish in the mizbarer. The one who I want to elevate and I need to disentangle, I can't disentangle something if I'm staying from a distance. It's impossible. So you have to go into the place of the entanglement. You have to go into the place, like we gave the metaphor for the Baal Shem Tov, the lifeguard has to jump into the water, to the storm, in order to save the person who was swept away. It would be nice if he doesn't, but how is he going to save him when he is down there? Right? It says when the Jews created the golden calf, so Hashem tells Moshe, Lech reid, go down. Lech reid. So there's a Tzaddik HaKohen of Lublin writes, and Tzedkas HaTzadik, Lech reid, the Kasamoifer, the Kamarna writes, Lech reid, not only physically, you're going to have to go down. Lech reid, you're going to have to go down to where they are emotionally, psychologically, existentially, in order to be able to lift them up. And the same is true in every person's life. Sometimes the way out of something is through it. The way out of pain is sometimes, very often, through pain. Because I have to get out of it. I have to, in order to be able to get out of it, I have to bring it up. I have to deal with it. I have to confront it. And he says that's a tremendous yirida, that's a tremendous descent of Malchus to go into those places. And that's the idea of the moon being diminished. The moon, representing Malchus, goes through diminishment, not because it's essentially blemished, but because it goes into places where its light, by definition, so to speak, becomes dark and eclipsed, not because it's dark, but because it's going into a place of darkness in order to be able to extract the goodness from the evil and to separate the two. And then he said, what's the idea of the blemish of the moon? The Machzadik said this is a soit kamos. It's a very deep secret. And he started to explain that the birur is a milchama atzuma. You're sometimes dealing with a very, very intense war. And we're not talking about physical wars between two nations, but sometimes the inner war is as fierce or fiercer. The Chavis Alavavis writes that there was once a king who came back from war, so a great sage met him and he says, welcome back from the small war, welcome to the great war. He said, which great war? He said, here, right here inside. You know, they used to call the First World War the Great War. Before the Second World War, the First World War was called the Great War because it was the greatest war ever, the worst war ever. After the Second World War, it already became the First World War. So the Great War, this is what the Melcheves Alavav says, the Melchama Gdol, the Great War, is internal. And he says it's a Melchama Atzuma. And the reason it's a Melchama Atzuma is because for Klippus, for the evil, this is life and death. Their entire oxygen, the oxygen of impurity, of Klippus, of evil, of lies, is from holiness. There's only one source of life. Hashem Elokim Chaim. V'atem adveikim b'Hashem Elokechem Chaim. Says in Avos Reb Nosson, Asara Nikru Chaim, 10 are called life. There's only one source of Chaim, of life. So for the Klippa not to get its nurture is a death sentence. So therefore it fights for its life, for this entanglement. And all it needs is entanglement. All it needs is to be tethered up into your system, you know. What it will fight most is against being untethered, against a soul that's untethered. Because as long as you're tethered, you know, you ever play tetherball in camp? You know how you got to get the ball wrapped around it. As long as it has its ball, you ever play tetherball? It's a fun game. The orange balls. As long before your friend, there was tetherball in camp. So as long as the ball is tethered around the pole, it's good, and then he wins. So as long as he engages me in thoughts and speech and action and emotions and feelings and experiences, the klippa lives. So he says that's why when the toiv leaves, they die. The Arizal says this in Sefer HaGilgulim. So he says they have mesiris nefesh mamish to grab any spark of kedusha they could through any scheme and excuse possible, and certainly to hold on to that which you have. You want more, but at least not to let that which you have slip away from you. In a person's life, we see it. Sometimes there are things that come inside of me, like I said last time. There's sometimes a perpetrator that comes into your life, takes over your mind, and you think it's you. It's nothing to do with you. The anxiety, the depression, the thoughts, the incessant mental chatter, the guilt, the shame, the critique, the sense of worthlessness. It's like a dibuk. And it's almost like you could almost feel it physically. It's like a clip. It like sets into the person. All it needs is a little piece of your brain. It's all feeding off you. It's all feeding off me. I'm giving it everything, and then I think it's me. I think it's me. The truth is, it's me because I'm feeding it, but it has nothing to do with me. Mamash has nothing to do with me. And that disentanglement, not to be enmeshed and entangled and mixed up, they will fight, the Klippa will fight with Mesidus Nefesh, not to do it, not to let you go. Because if you really disentangle yourself, there's nothing there. It's nothing. It's a pust, it's a vist, it's nothing. It never existed, it never will exist. Its whole being is that it's nothingness. It all feeds off the holiness and the goodness that you have inside of you. This is not an easy, he says it's not easy. And that's why Malchus is called Eishes Chayil, a woman of valor. You need a woman of great Chayil, of great courage, Chayil, like Gibor Chayil. You need to be a warrior. You have to be a warrior. It's something we don't realize. In the inner battle, there's warriors on the field, on the front lines of battle, right? We should mention our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael who are now on the front lines of battle with sworn enemies. And the only thing that can kill you is fear. The Rambam writes, it's a mitzvahs loisus, it's a mitzvahs esim, it's a mitzvah to eradicate fear during war. As they say, the only thing to fear is fear. And the person needs to be a warrior. You need to be a warrior because these clippers they're vicious. They're lethal. It's like physical perpetrators, they're emotional perpetrators. And they need to stay inside, because if they don't stay inside, what are they going to do? Where are they going to live? Like I said yesterday, it's like Tuesday, it's like a virus. It needs to kidnap the cell. And once it kidnaps the cell, it's good. It replicates on its own. The cell replicates. Who's helping the virus? What's the chutzpah of a virus? Without my healthy cells, the virus is not going anywhere. How's it replicating itself? It hijacks the cell, and now I replicate it for it. I work now for my clip. I work for my virus. Now the body gets smart, and we build an immune system. We build immunity, right? Antibodies against that virus. So what does the virus do? It comes with a mutation. It's called a mutation. A virus. How do viruses get in again? They look at the new system and they create a mutation, and the body doesn't recognize. There's an expression in Yiddish: "Derselbe Yente, anders geschleiert." It's the same Yente dressed up differently. It's the same virus. It's dressed up. You know how many mutations of viruses there are? So it always it mutates because the body doesn't recognize it. But it's the same clipper. So a person has to be a warrior. The challenge is I stop knowing what's me and what's the virus. What's me and what's the clip, and that's a big tragedy. Because as long as I know, I could see. The problem is it takes over, it hijacks you. Your cell thinks that the virus is your best friend. It's your worst enemy. So now the Tzemach Tzedek continues. That this is why Malchus is called Eishes Chayil. He says, Lilchai Milchemes Hashem. It's fighting a battle for truth. It's fighting a battle for Hashem. V'hine yesh oifen, the line starts, V'hine yesh oifen b'milchama hagashmis. There's a method, there's a strategy in physical battle. In military, there's many, many works that have been written over the generations from military strategy. The Art of War, and other famous works that were written by military warriors, commanders, generals, about how to fight wars. It's a system, there's a science, unfortunately, but there's a science of war. Today, obviously, with the new technology, things changed a lot, because so much is done from a distance. So he's going to describe now a certain element in a military strategy that was employed by generals and by warriors and by commanders and kings and leaders in their methods, in their methodology of conflict. It says, Yesh oifen b'milchama hagashmis. In physical war, you see the following strategy. Shalipa'amim, sometimes, muchrach ha'echad, lahaniach es atzmoi, muka ktsas, biyad hasheni, ad sheyirdef acharav. V'hu tachbula amuka atzuma, v'chachma amuka, kedei lahitziyoy el makom toy v'rachav, ad she'achar kach yachekeyu v'yachrimeyu, mikol v'kol, ad bilti hisheloi sadet. You hear this military strategy? It's a strategy where sometimes one side feels it has no choice and it needs to allow itself to be defeated. It goes in, it allows itself to become vulnerable, to become weak, to be beaten down and struck by the other side. In other words, it goes lechatchil. It's not b'di'evet. It's not a mistake. Sometimes you make a mistake. You're ambushed. You didn't figure things out. You're outnumbered. Whatever it is. But this was a plan. This was a strategy. The commander or the general thought it out before, allowing himself, his side, to be Muka. Muka means struck, beaten by the other side. Why? What happens? What happens now is it gives the other side fake confidence, and it brings them out from their holes, from their trenches, from their rabbit holes, because they're winning. So they start pursuing, and now you have it figured out. You needed to bring them into a certain arena. You needed to bring them out, as he puts it here. He puts it here that this was a very deeply thought out thing. It was all a trick. It was a scheme. And it was deeply thought out because you need to get him into a place that's toiv. It's good for you and it's rachav. It's expansive. You can't get people in trenches hiding and all over the place and covered up and eclipsed. But now you brought them out. But how could you bring them out? You had to give them the taste of victory. The dog had to smell the meat. They had to smell the reward. They had to feel, oh, it's good stuff here. The bee is attracted to the honey. You had to give them honey. And there's casualties. He says you have to be beaten. But it's the only way I can bring them out, and now I can completely eliminate them. To the point that there will be nothing left. If he would have not allowed himself to be beaten in the beginning, to be struck in the beginning, meaning I want to be protected. So I remain in my position. I don't let you get anything. What happens? He wouldn't be able to achieve anything. He wouldn't be able to eliminate him, to triumph, to destroy and obliterate and decimate the enemy. Because I have no access on that level. Even if I can get one person, another person, another person. But in order to destroy the army and stage and ultimately create victory, there's no choice. Sometimes this is the way to do it. The Second World War, the First World War, if you study, there were a lot of these tactics that were employed constantly to give the enemy an impression of something and then to use that against the enemy. There were times even, for example, that they sent troops in a certain direction. So Hitler, Germany forces thought that the onslaught is going to come from there. And this is where they concentrated the best of their men. And the Allies knew they're going to lose over there because they didn't have their real concentration. But it brought the Germans there. Now they can go attack somewhere else. What are all these strategies about? You're giving up people. It's not easy. It's not a simple decision. But the reason you're doing it is in order to be able, right? In this case, they wanted to go to another place where they would have much less resistance. Normandy, if you're familiar with Normandy, June 1944. Yeah. Some of the other battles. Here, the specific strategy is, I need to take out the enemy, I need to bring him into the places where I can do the work. How do I do that? So you have to be able to give him victory. So he comes out, and now he wants to finish. And you bring him where you want to bring him. So on one level, it seems like you're in the ultimate defensive position. Ultimately, you're losing and you're running away. But really, you're completely on the offense. Completely on the offense. Even the casualties is part of the offense. V'nimtza shebe'emes mitchila hasoyne Maka gamken. In the beginning, the enemy beats him, strikes him, and there are casualties. We're talking now the physical examples, military examples. Unfortunately, some of the troops are lost. Anshe Chayil are soldiers, they're lost. But the enemy doesn't realize he's not destroying his enemies, he's destroying himself. This allowed him to be obliterated completely. He thinks he's winning. Every casualty that we're having is ultimately he's signing his own death sentence. He's putting a nail into his own coffin. He thinks he's having atzlacha. That's what you have to do to bring him out, to bring the monster out, to bring the demons out from the dark. You got to give him a little a little beef. You got to feed the monster. But why are you feeding him? You're just feeding him to be able to put poison in the food. You're feeding him, but ultimately he gets used to eating from you and then there's poison. So what happens here is, he's killing you, l'cha'ira. He doesn't realize he's killing himself in this process. This is all a mashal. What's the nimshal? You understand the nimshal?
Person's life, it happens for you.
Everything that exists in this world is a metaphor for spirituality. When we study wars or you study history, people think you're just studying history. You're not. You're studying a mashal for a nimshal. Everything in the physical world is a mashal. It's a metaphor, it's a parable, it's an allegory. If this is a system that works in this world, it's because this is the inner system of the soul. Because everything is aligned, everything is connected. It's a shtalshalus. The physical is manifested, is a manifestation from the spiritual. So if this is a military strategy, that means on a spiritual level, this is a strategy that exists. What is it b'nimshal? B'milchemes Hashem. In the divine war, Shezehu Soid Golus HaShchina. This is the secret of Golus HaShchina. What's that Golus HaShchina? The Shechina is in exile. We know the words. What does it really mean, the Shechina is in exile? What does it mean, the Shechina is in exile? Who says this? Reb Shimon ben Yochai. Reb Shimon ben Yochai says in Maseches Megillah, the end, Daf Chavtes, Amar Rashbi, B'chol Makom Shegolu Yisrael Shechina Iman. Every place to which the Jewish people were exiled, the Shechina is with them. Galu le'Edom, they were exiled to Edom. Edom is usually represented by Esav in Rome. Shechina Imam. Galu le'Elam, Shechina Imam. Galu le'Bavel, Shechina Imam. Everywhere they went, the Shechina went with them. What's the idea of Shechina Imam? Shechina Imam mamish. It's not an exaggeration. It means that the Shechina is there. Shechina is Malchus, the divine presence. Begalus, it's in exile. Biyad oise asar. When you're in exile, what does it mean? Others have control over you. If I'm in exile by you, when Napoleon was exiled to the island, ois Napoleon. He wasn't the emperor of France and the emperor of the world. He was controlled. He was told when to eat, when to sleep, where to walk, where not to walk. That's what exile means. You're in galus. You're completely confined, and you're under the dictatorship and control of the forces who exiled you. So what does it mean, Shechina begalusa? God is in exile. What does that mean he's in exile? He's controlled. So he says, Biyam begalus biyadois yasar, so to speak, in exile, in the hand of that sar. We spoke before in the previous about the 70 sarim, the 70 nations. Each one has a spiritual guardian angel that gives it thoughts to oppress the Jewish people. So in the hand, to the point that he's compelled, the Shechina is compelled to give this spiritual sar life and greatness. Because there's no life that doesn't come from the source of life. There's no greatness and no energy and no majesty that doesn't come from the source of life. So I'm feeding you, but I'm feeding you. The you is something that's antithetical to me. The you is used against me. So I'm feeding you. I'm giving you what you have. I'm giving you what you have. So he says, this life is all from Hashem. But where is it going to? It's going to clip it. It's going to shells, to husks, to darkness, to impurity. So the chayas of Hashem that's being fed and nurtured to these forces is mamish in exile. He's giving life to pure negativity, which is separated, and doing the antithetical, the complete antithesis of Hashem's will. So giving life to that which is trying to destroy that which it's getting life from. That's the paradox of evil. Evil can't live without holiness, but the holiness gives it everything it has, and it uses the energy of holiness to do what? To try to destroy the holiness. And as long as the holiness can remain under the water in exile, suppressed, and concealed and in exile, The clip is winning. During the exile, there's a tremendous agony, a tremendous pain, suffering for the Shechina of Uzay Yisbarach, of his strength. You have to go down. He's bringing down energy to places that he hates. Strong words. You're feeding that which you hate, and you're feeding it. How can you feed it? You're in exile. It looks like you're completely lost control. You now took over. The Shechina is taken over by the forces. But what is it like? It's like the war. Who's winning? It looks like the enemy is winning. You allowed yourself to go into a place where the enemy is destroying you. You did it. All this is really a wondrous scheme. Painful, but wondrous. Nifla means it's also a pella. Pella means it's a mystery. It's not a clear science. It's very mysterious how this system works. By going down there, just like here, you went in. What happens now? You went into that place. So now you can ultimately kill him completely. You take out all the energy, even the energy that he has from the beginning of history, from Shviras HaKelim. Remember, the beginning is the breaking of the kelim that we spoke in the beginning of mine, Vayimloch, Vayamos, the Yeshes, Vayamos. Even that you take out. Va'oz ye'ovid legamri, and then it's completely lost. V'zeu soid, and this is the secret. It says in Yeshaya Perek Chav Zayin, it's a whole sugya Maseches Soid to the first Perek. B'sa sa b'shalcha t'rivenes gemarzak shenismali sa osoi. It says when this smali sa osoi, when the clip is sa'ah, when its measurements are filled, that's when it gets lost. There's a certain measurement. Sa'ah is a certain measurement. When the cup is filled with too much, that's when you send it away. Uksiv kilei sholim avoyne amoyri adheina. Shem says, Bereshis Tesvav, the sin of the Amoyri is not going to be complete until the fourth generation of Jews who will be able to go to Eretz Yisrael and expel them. In other words, there's a certain amount that Klippa feeds and feeds and feeds and feeds, and then there's a certain point it has so much, and that's when it self-destructs. It doesn't realize it's self-destruct. It's eating more and eating more and eating more and eating more and eating more, and at this point it's just it's over. It's like the enemy is beating and beating you and beating you and beating you and beating you, and then boom, he doesn't realize that he just signed his death certificate. And even though the metaphor is not like the spiritual story, in military strategy, it's a necessity. If you don't allow those casualties to happen, you're not going to be able to bring out the enemy and kill him. So you have no choice. Hashem could eliminate them completely without giving them anything. You don't have to give in. You don't have to feed them. You don't have to go into gullus. You don't have to. You're the boss. Just take away the energy. They got nothing. They got nothing without you. You create them, and then you say, oh, I have to give in to them in order to destroy them. Stop creating them. They won't exist. It's not like in the military strategy where the enemy is a formidable enemy, and I have to deal with my limits by employing his insecurities or his need to win. Here, the enemy is also you. You're right. He says, you're right. But that's what his will is. Lahamid hadover al pi hamishpat shaloi la'abdam belitaina. It works with a system. They don't just get destroyed. Oh, you're destroyed today. They destroy themselves. It shouldn't just be destroying without a taina. So there's nobody to demand justice. Now Hashem ultimately wants that Tumah should destroy itself. Klippa should destroy itself, because then there's really nothing left. It's not like the Klippa could come and say, oh, you created a system and you outsmarted the system because you made the game. You cheated on the dice because you know how to cheat the dice. So he does it in the system itself does it. You see the nekuda that he's saying? Let's see another few lines. V'hine inyan galus hashchina hu soid b'gimu desayera. This is the blemish of the moon. The blemish of the moon. Not just the moon is diminished. The moon is considered a blemish. Sick. Crippled. B'gimu means you're crippled. Why? Shahachitzoinim yoinkim imidas malchusi yizbarach. Because the chitzoinim, the external forces, get their nurture from malchus. And they destroy the kedusha. They're using the holiness. It's like in the war. There's casualties. They're using, they're defeating the shechina. They're defeating the holiness. They're blemishing it. But this you have to know. The nurture is never from the pnimius. It's never from the core. Let's think about the moon for a moment. Is the moon really diminished? The moon is never diminished. The moon doesn't wax and wane. We think it waxes and wanes. And people think the moon is small, the moon is full. The moon is not full and the moon is not small. The moon is always the same moon as Elba Lavana. Half of the moon is bright and half of the moon is dark. The question is what you see. When the moon is facing the sun and the earth is facing the dark side of the moon, we look at the moon, we say there's no moon. Of course there's a moon. I don't see it. We talk about the moon like it belongs to us. You know, in Chaim, they had a problem with Kiddush Levana because the moon wasn't showing up. So they decided, it was a beautiful night, that they need to do something to hold on to the moon. So they had a barrel of water, and they saw that the moon is being reflected in the barrel of water. So they decided they're going to hijack the moon. So they put the lid on the bottle of water so that the moon can't escape from the water. And the next night they announced a huge Kiddush Levana. And they opened up the lid, Hayele Deinenu, and they created a committee. You know how Israel creates these committees for investigations? Va'adat Chakira, it's called. A committee for investigation, Verad Gegam V'Delavana. Somebody came and stole the moon. And in Chaim, they're still searching for the one who stole the moon. He may be hanging around somewhere in Shul, so if you see him, he's the man. If you see somebody walking around with a Levana, report it to the committee of Chaim. Like every joke, there's a lot of depth in it. Can you steal the moon or can't you steal the moon? This is where the paradox happens. The moon doesn't become smaller, the moon doesn't become bigger, the moon is not diminished. On Rish Chodesh, I don't see anything because I'm facing the dark side of the moon. Then the moon moves away a little bit and I see a little bit. Most of it I can't see. Why? Because the position is turned away from the earth, facing the sun. And the part that's facing the earth is dark because it doesn't face the moon. There's an expression in Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, Daf Chav Gimel, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Me'olam lo yira sachama b'gimasa shalavana. The sun never saw a blemished moon. You understand? When the sun looks at the moon, it's never blemished. Why not? Pashut. Because when the sun looks at the moon, it's getting all the light. The Baal Shem Tov once said that that's what a mashpia is. That's what a real teacher, a real parent is. When you're the sun and you look at the moon, you never see the blemish of the moon. When people start telling you how blemished your child is, tell them, obviously you're not the son. You're not the mentor. If you would be the son, you wouldn't see the B'gimas HaLevana. You would see the opportunity to light up the Levana. But we're not the sun. We're the earth. We're on the earth. The full moon is just that we get to see that half that's facing the sun. Later, we don't get to see that half. We get to see part of it. What does this mean spiritually? Everything we're talking about here, the souls that go through very heavy, painful journeys, he says it's only the chitzonius. It's only the external level, meaning, mebchinas oir de nukva. It's the skin of femininity, the skin. In a person, you have flesh, you have sinews, you have bones, and then you have skin, epidermis, the hide. The yinik is always from only the oir, from the hide. Kosnes oir. It says Hashem made for Adam and Chava tunics of oir ayin vav reish, leather, hide. Ve'inyan oir ubchinas oisius levushim belvad. The oir represents oisius, letters, levushim, garments. It's like the skin is called the levush of the body. Ukilevush tachlifem. It says in Tehillim, garments are interchangeable. Go back to the metaphor. The mashal when one team, one party, one side allows the enemy to beat his camp, he doesn't send there his generals. He doesn't send there his greatest warriors. They have to fight afterwards. He's going to send those who unfortunately will not make it in the battle, probably, but they're part of the war effort. They go out. Is the chitzonius. What does it mean spiritually? The enemy only is allowed to get nurture from the external part of the soul. The moon itself is not blemished. From the perception of earth, it's blemished, which means from an external vantage point, the soul became blemished. When the Egyptians took Jewish children and they placed them in the walls because they didn't fulfill the quota of bricks, so they used children in the walls. Moshe screamed to Hashem. So Hashem said, Koitzim ani mechala. Thorns are being destroyed. Moshe said, what? He said, take out a child. Micha was a child that they put into the wall and Moshe saved him. Who was Micha? Micha, during Kriyas Yamsuf, he went through the sea with Avodah Zarah, with Pesel Micha, with a statue. Asa Mashasa, he did what he did. What's this a dugma? Again, it's a spiritual metaphor. Micha was sacrificed, so to speak. He was lost. But who was lost? Somebody who would later do Avodah Zarah. Moshe didn't understand that. Spiritually, it means that which part of the soul is allowed to be captured by the wall, to be exploited by the klippah, it's the level of micha, meaning it's the most external part. Ach gamzen, even that is b'shvil harevach hanifla. It's all for the tremendous benefit. All the sparks are going to be taken out. The sparks that are beyond Atzilus, what klippah grabbed from the breaking of the vessels. V'zehu soid ma'aseh Yehuda v'Tamar. This is the secret of Yehuda and Tamar. How is it possible Yehuda sees a woman, he thinks she's a zayna, she's a harlot, and he goes to her. And you see he was embarrassed because he sent back the collateral. He owed her goats, and he sent it with his friend, and they said there's no woman here who's a zayna. Right, so Yehuda said, let her just keep my stuff because we don't want to embarrass ourselves. Obviously he didn't... Peniel lavuz. Let her stick with my stick and my belt and my seal. And later she used that, of course, to prove that Yehuda was the one who did it. So he says, "Shugamken anoches makom ktsasli enikas asitra achera." There's sometimes situations where you create space for the nurture of sitra achera. Kedei sheyitziu mehem bekavanosam l'shem shamayim kedei isa bezoyer achere es Mashiach umalchei beis David shu amishpacha ayikara shechafetz Hashem behem v'kama neviim yotzu gamken mimena. The kavanah l'shem shamayim is you're going there, you're giving them power, you're feeding them. But what are you taking out in the process? Yehuda took out the nitzitz of Mashiach because Tamar became pregnant from Yehuda with twins, Peretz and Derech, and Peretz was the great-great-great-great-grandfather of Boaz, the father of Ovid, the father of Yishai, David, Shlomo, and Mashiach. So in that relationship, the Sitra Achra got excited. Yehuda is having znus, right? It's a field day. Right? It's a gewaldik. So what happens? They come out. They brought out all their forces. They brought out all their sparks. They brought out the spark of Mashiach. And Yehuda Jacobson. They didn't realize they're destroying themselves. But how did he do it? He had to do something that looked like a sin. He had to do something that looked like corruption. He gave Sitra Achra a little space. Here, you got it. Gewaldik. Now you bring out everybody. Oh, now Yehuda went for the punch. It's unwittingly.
But the Sitra Achra knew that the Tamar was kosher, no?
Yehuda sees a woman. Oh, this is nothing. This is celebrating Sitra. This is a victory for them. There was an element of something questionable. Let's put it that way. Yehuda said Tamar has to be burnt, and Yehuda himself was embarrassed. Right? It wasn't so pashut. Chazal say a malach pushed Yehuda. What does it mean a malach pushed him? So people think it's just the teachers trying to cover up. Well, you skipped the story, but we didn't. But in those yeshivas where they don't skip the story. No, I know. So I say the stories in the Tanakh. People look at me like I made up these stories. I'm like, it's in Genesis. You read it in Parshas in the Bible. I didn't make up these stories. But even those who don't, they tell malach. What does it mean a malach pushed? It doesn't necessarily mean somebody came and pushed him. It's very deep. It means you're pushed by situations that are deeper than yourself into places that are very difficult places. And you blame yourself for being evil. No. Your soul signed up to go into places that other people don't go. And it's very painful places. And your moon is going to be blemished because you're going to be feeding them. But ultimately, it's all to destroy the klipa and the tumah. And some souls sign up for this journey. You don't do this voluntarily. We say in the morning, Al teviyenu l'dei nisayan. We ask Hashem, don't bring me to that. Some souls, before you're born, you sign up for this. It's not something that's imposed on you. The military commander, I want to give Mazel Tov to Reb Shmuel Shleif, is making a big simcha tonight. Tonight. Some souls, the Herst, they sign up. It's not a simple thing. And remember that when I'm in here, I'm in exile. It's not like there are casualties. The soul suffers. Because the soul signed up to go in to where? To go into the place of Klippa where they're taking over, so to speak. And when they take over, there's casualties. I'm suffering. They take me over. A part of me, l'cha'ira, died. That's the incredible, what the Bible is describing is what people literally go through. A part of them dies emotionally because of what they went through. And now they look at their lives. Much of the years they didn't even know they died. They died without knowing they died because the Klippa took over. At least if I know I died, I'm not there. There's somebody deeper than the death. But sometimes they don't even know. And then they wake up one day. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, you have to understand, you're completely beyond it. You're as pure as it gets. Your soul is so pure, it said, I'm going to go into this place. And in order to go into this place, I can't remain in heaven and say, hey, sparks, come out. I have to go down. But it's not only I have to go down, I have to become entangled. I have to become enmeshed. I have to allow myself to become, so to speak, a victim in order to be able to be inside that space. And at that moment, you have to know that the soul itself was never contaminated. Never. It can't be. The mood itself is completely whole. The way the soul is translated into the skin, the meaning the way you're experiencing yourself, there's a blemish. At the core, there was no blemish even for one moment. Shimshon is another example. All these stories. Today, it's not something we do voluntarily, but we do it involuntarily today. Meaning, it's not today, I'm 25 years old, I say this is where I'm going. But there's souls that sign up for this journey. And it seems like an incredibly, incredibly painful journey because it is. But really what's happening here is, these are the souls that destroy the impurity in the world, and the impurity in the community, and impurity on the planet. These are the souls. It's a lot of courage. It's a lot of courage to volunteer to be from those guys. So the mashal is not perfect. In the mashal, you're right. You're not talking here. He's speaking out the idea. In the mashal, it's all different people, so you don't have it a perfect mashal. But the idea is that the people you send over there are the weaker ones. So what does it mean spiritually? You're not sending the core of your soul. The core of your soul is not getting lost. The core of your soul remains completely whole. It's the chitzonius of the neshama that, so to speak, becomes a casualty. The neshama signed up for this. It's Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh. You have to give yourself credit. There's people, they suffer their whole life because of things that happen. They don't give themselves credit. You have to give your neshama credit. Your neshama said, Ribono Shel Olam, I'll go there. The tragedy is, you don't know you signed up for it, and you blame yourself, and you think you're evil. And the truth is, it's the exact opposite. It's only the souls that had the greatest power that can go there. Chitzonius means what's affected is the skin of the soul, the outer layer, like the moon. The moon is not affected by the cycle. We look at the moon and say, oh, Nebuch, there's no moon. You're the Nebuch, not the moon. The moon is not a Nebuch. You understand what I'm saying? The moon didn't disappear. From my perspective, I don't have the light of the moon. The way the soul is appearing to me, I don't have its light. I feel dark. He says, but in itself, it's full of light. It has more light. That's why I can go there. Spiritual outcome from it is we start healing. The world, the community, the planet, the Jewish people, the 7 billion people on the planet. Everybody heals. We weed out the abuse. We identify the criminality, the evil. Boom. You put needles into the balloons of lies. Don't you see it happen? Don't you see it happening now? Don't you see it happening? And who fights it most? The perpetrators. The perpetrators. Because all the years they were the they were the tzaddikim. Of course they double down. They destroy you, and then when you want to heal, they say you're not allowed to heal. It's against Torah. First they destroy you, and then they criticize every method of healing. Gewaldig. Haratzachta v'gam yarashta. The only ones who can fight it are the people who know the pain. People who don't know the pain, they can't fight. They don't understand it. They don't understand it. What do they understand? Baruch Hashem, they don't understand it. That's the idea. Only if I go into the enemy territory can I bring out the goodness. Can I see this is Ra, this is Toiv. Get out of the system. The only people who can uproot evil from the system are the people who were affected by it. And it looks like they were killed by it, but they weren't killed by it. Their souls allowed themselves to appear that they were killed by it in order that they can kill it. Before birth, the souls sign up. Huh? Oh, that's the whole maimah. What's a mum? That's the maimah. Yeah, there's millions of examples, but the point is the same. Because it's such a real process, the soul is so present in the pain, we start thinking we're the evil. Because you really go there. When you speak, again, in the mashal, the casualties are physical. So people are killed and other people are not. In the nimshal, it's all the same person. right? So you say, a part of me really dies. I'm like, I'm messed up. You're not messed up. I am messed up. You're feeling messed up because that's the only way you can mess up the klippa. It helps others. First of all, it helps others spiritually. There's an energy in the world of healing. It helps everybody. Second of all, it creates awareness. Third of all, people start talking about it. Fourth of all, people start doing things about it. And people get educated. People get enlightened. And rats don't like the light. Rats like darkness. They don't like the light. You'll always see there's certain people who always protest people who talk about certain things. They have all excuses in the world. Okay? Now, sometimes people are very naive and innocent. But be very, very suspicious. People say, oh, we don't talk about this. Really? Why not? Because nobody wants a light shining. Who wants to shut the lights? Everything is good. So let's stay in the basement. So Beruchnius, what this really means is, it feels like I'm dead. I'm a casualty. I'm dead. But there was all just to destroy it. You died in order to live and to bring life to everybody else. Remember, in the mashal, it's different people. In the mashal, it's all the same person. It looks like a part of the soul died only to come back to much stronger life, to save and to heal the world. So that someone says, well, God couldn't have done it differently. So that's a good question. He could have done it differently. But in the system that he created, it's worked through people themselves. It doesn't happen through miracles. Boom, it's gone. We work it through, we fight it through, and that way the world is really transformed from within. The klippa really has nothing to say. Yeah, through din v'cheshbon. Yeah, everybody does it. Remember, where people are born is not their choice. People have to realize that if Hashem chose I should be born in a certain family, in a certain community, that's part of the hashgacha. Sometimes people who become Bali Tshuva, they feel so guilty to talk about their family and their past. Like, what are you guilty? That's where God wanted you to be. You think it was a mistake? He could have brought you down to a soul in Lakewood or Monsey or Meir Sharim or Bnei Brak. He wanted you to be born in Moscow or a Monsey. You mean not everybody is so religious in Monsey? It's not a mistake. Every soul has its shlichus. Obviously, you teach children things in the proper language. The main thing what we want every child to be able to feel is attachment, be able to feel seen and safe and secure and soothed, and to be able to know that they have extraordinary protection and they could be open and what we believe in them and we're here for them. We want to be able to give children resilience. And the most important thing, not to fear themselves. To be able to really appreciate their value and celebrate their lives. That's what we can do. Certain things we can't do. Some people try to protect their kids 24 hours a day, and then they find out the worst of the worst from places they did not imagine. Unfortunately. Some parents thought they were the most educated in the world, right? They listened to Rabbi YY's classes on abuse, and they thought they're going to be the quintessential parents, right? And little do they know, there's a grandfather in the house. There's a grandmother in the house. There's an uncle, there's an aunt, there's an older sibling who's a creep, who's a murderer, and their kids were murdered. They didn't know. It wasn't in camp. It wasn't a teacher. It wasn't a gabbai in shul. That can also be. It wasn't some creep in the mikveh. It was his own family member, her own family member, their own family member. You have a grandparent, you have a grandfather, a grandmother, an uncle, an aunt, a brother, a sister, whatever. What are you supposed to protect? I'm just giving an example. I'm giving one example, yeah? So now you realize you did everything for these children, and you have to realize this was some journey. We can't take that back, but we could be there for them. And the most important way of being there for them is not to blame them. What happens often is the kids get traumatized, and then they're blamed for their trauma, and then they're told to snap out of their trauma right? And then they're blamed for everything they're not doing right. We destroy them, and then we blame them. Eliyahu Hanavi has 3 words for it. Haratzachta v'gam yarashta. You murder them, and then you inherit them. Gewaldik. What a beautiful strategy. And then when they grow up and they want to heal, you're not allowed to. It's against Torah. You got me on the wrong topic, I'm sorry. Yeah. Other battles are spoken about. This battle is not spoken about. Rabbi, why? Trauma. Everything is trauma. Healing. Everybody has to heal. Everybody is sick. What happened with telling people, be normal? You destroy them and then you tell them to be normal. I love it. Be normal, really. That's what filth is. That's what dirt is. That's what illness is. And when it gets camouflaged with Yiddishkeit, so the whole Yiddishkeit becomes dirty and filthy, unfortunately. Not because Yiddishkeit is dirty, but because it's used to protect dirt and to cover up on emotional illness and sickness and dysfunction and abuse and narcissism. And if anybody says anything, they're the crazy ones. You should know some of our craziest kids are the most normal ones. You should just know that. In every family, they call the family crucible, there's a carbon chatas, the kid who wasn't ready to hold it together. He wasn't ready to protect all the murderers, and he broke down because he's the most normal and sensitive. And then he's the one who's blamed as the meshugana, the embarrassment to the family. He's the only one who's the normal one, and that's why he became crazy. I'm not saying it's always the case, chas v'shalom. I'm not trying here to paint big pictures and use broad brushes on very sensitive issues. I'm just saying klippa is very lethal and tumah is very lethal. And as the Tzedek says, some souls sign up to go into those places and get affected by it, only for one reason, so you will be able to kill it. Nobody else could kill it. You got to bring out the enemy. You bring out the enemy because it's inside of you. And now what happens? You can kill it. You hear? Think about it emotionally. How do I bring out the enemy into the system? The enemy is under the surface. How do I bring it out? You know how? Think about it. You thought you were being hurt as a child, right? Your soul said, I'm going there. And you're going to be shot at. And now suddenly the enemy is right here. It's in your brain. And you know what you can do now? You can kill it. So kill it. The problem is we don't learn this maimer. What do I mean we don't learn it? We don't internalize it. We think we are the clip. That's why this is so important. You think that you're the evil. You understand? You don't realize the reason you think you're the evil is because you're the only one who can destroy it. Because it's inside you. It's right here. It's waiting for the punch. We misinterpret what we're going through. We're feeling anxiety, depression, disassociation, detachment, horrible pain. And what do you say? I'm messed up. I am messed up. It's the exact opposite. You're the only one who can destroy this vicious enemy. You brought him out from his rabbit hole. You brought him out. How did you bring him out? By letting him think that he's killing you and getting your energy. And he got your energy. Taka does it. So now that Tzemach Tzedek says, realize who you are. You are infinite. You are divine. He has nothing with you. You are infinitely greater. You're good. You're pure. You're not tumah. What do you mean? I'm all overwhelmed. 40 years of my life were taken away because of this. Yes, 40 years of your life you suffered, but remember what it was about, so that now you can actually destroy the evil.
How I use that to discern from the places I should not go. I shouldn't go.
We don't go, like he says in the parentheses, if you're not Yehuda, it's not a mitzvah to go there. He says in parentheses, we're going to learn next time, that after Matan Torah, we don't just start going everywhere. Because I'm going to go to the clip and give it. But I'm not talking about those situations. We don't have to follow Yehuda and Tamar. But the story of Yehuda is everybody's story. We end up in places. You think most people choose it? Their souls chose it. Yehuda knew his soul. Yehuda, everybody's soul chose it, but we choose it before we're born. Yehuda was in touch with his soul after he was born, so he could choose it after. That could be. That's what it means. A malach pushed him. A malach pushed him means there's forces inside of us that get us into places that we would have never been. We don't belong there. You're a good person. You don't belong there. You were sent there. And the reason you were sent there is because only you will be able to destroy the clip. And that's the soid kamos, that you became blemished. You died, but you didn't die. It looks like you died so that the clipper could... The hyenas, you ever watch these, the hyenas come to eat on the carcass? You ever see that? You know hyenas? And they laugh, they fabreng. You ever see hyenas? They're ugly animals. And the lion dies, the elephant dies, and all the hyenas come and they laugh. You ever, right? And they make a big suda. And they mechalik all the food, the meat. Right? Not lovingly. Hyenas are hyenas. They all celebrate on the carcass. Right? Now, what's your job? Your job is you have all the hyenas here. Kill each and every one of them. Expose those lowlifes. The problem is you're also the carcass. And you don't realize that. You think you're the carcass. You don't realize you didn't really die. Yeah, exactly. Hayinu kachalmim. What's kachalm? What's a chalm? It's a moide de kavart. You ever had a dream that you were in the Holocaust? Anybody? You didn't. Well, Nechemi is Nechemi, but some of us did. Some people, trust me. But I'm saying in the Holocaust, and you're frightened, right? And you see the Nazis and everything, and then you wake up, oh my God, wow, I'm in New York, 2023. And what happens to the fear? Hayinu kechalmim. You realized in your imagination you were there, but you weren't there. That's a very, very deep moment. When the neshama realizes I was never really there. The chitzonis, I went there. I went there to defeat the klippa. I was never there because I was always higher than it. I don't feel that way. That's exactly what the klippa does. It took your imagination and says, you're me, you're evil. So it's, so to speak, I died. So now the hyenas all come. But you know what happens now? You could kill them because you didn't really die. Again, in the mashal, the casualties are casualties. They're unfortunately dead. But in the nimshal, it's the same soul that is the casualty who later destroys. It's the same soul because it's the chelik elakam yimal. The hezvus tutzich. You see why this is the source of all healing? We need techniques, but this is the source of all healing. It says divrei elakim Chaim. You hear the words, you hear the divine words of purity. There's no tumah, there's no dysfunction. There's no manipulation, you don't exploit people. Whenever religion is taught through unhealthy people and detached people and disassociated people, they contaminate it. It's not I'm saying. The Gemara says it in Maseches Yuma. Zacha nasa lo sam Chaim. Lo zacha nasa lo sam amavas. A person merits the Torah's medicine for life. And if not, chas v'shalom, it's poison. It doesn't say the Torah is poison. Nasa lo sam amavas. For this person it becomes poison and they poison others. I once heard from the Rebbe Atayr, Zacha from the word Zach, Zakos. Shemen Zayazach, Zacha. If your Torah is refined, Nasa Loi Sam Chaim. Loi Zacha, if your Torah is not Mezuchich, if it's Grabe Torah, if you don't have refinement in Torah, Nasa Loi Sam, the same Torah is used for who knows what. Since people shouldn't think it's only a Chassidish Shavart, I'll tell you a word from the Vilna God, who can't be accused in saying Chassidish Shavart, even though he does quite a few times. The Vilna Gaon writes, the Gemara says in Baba Kama Daf Yudzayin, Ein mayim ela Torah. Torah is water. So he says, when you water the fields or the farms or the gardens, the water doesn't decide what's going to grow. If you planted an apple tree, the water is going to bring out apples. And what if you planted thorns and weeds? The water is going to bring out that. Whatever you plant, the water is not going to tell you, oh, we're going to have watermelon and kiwis and cantaloupe and pomegranates and cotton candy. grapes. If you plant fungi, if you have fungi and bacteria and whatever you plant, and if you plant a poisonous plant, that's where the water is going to grow. So the Vilna Gaon says, Torah is water. Whatever midas you have inside of you, it's going to help grow. If you're a mushchis, if you're an unworked out person, if you never worked on yourself, you don't refine yourself, you don't deal with your skeletons, the water is going to help those midas grow. The Torah is going to help it grow. You'll have a Rabbi Kivege, you'll have Rayas, you'll have a Chachas. Your Torah will become dysfunction. It'll be a source for dysfunction. And if you grow, and if you plant Edelkeit and Bittel and Emes, that's what the Torah will grow. That's what the Vilna Gaon says. It's a word. Torah is water. It's going to work with whatever there is. That's exactly what I'm saying. I had a Zayda. He was arrested by the Bolsheviks, by the communists in 1938, and he was tortured terribly. And my Zayda died very young, in 53, so I never knew him. But a Yid told me that he heard from my Zayda, he was a Bacher, and it was Yutas Kislev in Paris, in Brinois. And my Zayda was there, and he wasn't feeling well, so they gave him a room in the dormitory. So he was sitting with a few Bachrim, and he was telling them the story when he was in prison in the 30s. So this Bacher told me, his name is Brickman, Rabbi Brickman. He told me the story. He says, your grandfather told me in 1947, 48, that he said the way they tortured you by the Soviets was, the worst torture was no sleep. We don't know what it is, but you know what it is not to sleep for 6 nights, 7 nights, 8 nights? And you fall asleep, and they shine lights on you, you're not a person anymore. At some point, you just break down, right? That's how cults do it. Baruch Hashem, we don't know what it means. You didn't sleep for 1 night, Shavuos, and Baruch Hashem, you sleep. Chatzkel Levenstein used to tell the Bachim in Ponovich, right? You're up all night, Shavuos, and then you daven v'sikin, and noch geht man schlafen bis Elul. That's by the Litvisha, by the Chassidim, it's bis Simchas Torah. By the Litvisha, they have to wake up for Elul. By the Chassidim, they wake up Simchas Torah for Hakafas. So they get another 2 months of sleeping. Poor Svardim have to wake up in Elul early. But in any case, why am I saying this? Oh, they don't let you sleep. You don't let people sleep. You're not a person, you're a zombie. So the Zayda said that the worst was they didn't let him sleep, and they would torture you with questions. The Soviets were brutal beyond. The communists created a hell on earth. So he says there was one investigator that spoke a perfect Yiddish. And my Zayda is looking at him, and he's torturing him. And they wanted he should admit that he was a counter-revolutionary, and then they execute you. They send you 40 years to the Gulag, where you anyway died. Stalin killed tens of millions of people this way. So at some point, he looks at my Zayda, and he says, Du weißt wer ich bin? He says, you know who I am? He says, who are you? And he tells him his family name. It was a Chabad family, and his brother was a big chassid, an oizg arbeiter Yid. His brother, this guy's brother. He says, that's who I am. I'm this family. So my Zayda told the boys, he said, and at that moment, it clicked. I'm a arbeit auf sich. If you work on yourself, you become like his brother, who was a real Oved Hashem. And he said, I'm arbeit nicht auf sich. You could become a monster. You become a monster. 2 brothers. So that's the point that Vilna Gaon makes. The key is that this is true with everything. Who are the ones who can identify the tumah? Those who were there. Those who never smelled. If you never smelled corruption, how can you identify corruption? You can't. That's the mashal. You go into the enemy territory. You brought him out. Unfortunately, you now have him inside of you. And now you can get rid of him. Nobody else could. That's the vart. And you have to know, if you were in those places, or you are in those places, it's with one purpose only. Doesn't mean it's not painful. but it means it's not random, and the blemish is not at the core, ever. Okay, my dear friends.
Didn't get the bitter shiny yet.
Huh?
We didn't get the bitter shiny yet.
To where?
Bitter shiny.
Oh, we're bitter edition now. This is bitter edition. Bitter sheni is a sach geschmack. Bitter sheni is Milan. Chassidus a ganze Tag. That's bitter sheni. Bitter sheni is chachma. Bitter sheni is bittul b'metzias. Bitter edition is. Once you're done with bitter edition, then you can go to bitter sheni. Bitter sheni is shena lakus. Bitter sheni is the moon doesn't have to be diminished. Of course we're going to continue. What do you think? If you don't continue this, what are you going to continue? He calls it a side kamos. He calls it. We say, what's the secret? Everybody, it always remains a secret. It's essentially a secret. You could talk about it for hours. It's still a secret. It happens in such deep places. You understand? Anything you say, you're not talking about this. You have to be very sensitive. We're talking about, it's such edler things, the place peoples go, and the interplay between the kedusha and the klippah. It's so confusing. It's a secret. It's a secret. And you have to have that sensitivity.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.